My mother died today, or maybe yesterday, I don't know. I received a telegram from the old people's home. Mother deceased. Funeral tomorrow. Very sincerely yours. That doesn't mean anything. It might have been yesterday. These strange words were spoken by the protagonist of Albert Camus' novel, The Stranger. He was a man who smoked cigarettes and drank coffee beside his mother's coffin without shedding a tear. Not because he didn't love her, but because to him it made no difference to the world or to his mother now that she was gone. Meursault appeared to be a nihilist, yet not a depressive one. In fact, he might have been the happiest person in the entire novel. But how? How was he so content and at peace with his life despite committing murder, spending time in prison, and ultimately being sentenced to death? That is the question Camus answers in his short novel, which I will discuss chapter by chapter. The irrationality of the human life and universe. Since we all are going to die, it's obvious that when and how don't matter. Just as Sartre famously said that we are condemned to be free, Camus argued that the only certainty in life is the inevitability of death. Since all humans will ultimately face death, he suggested that all lives are equally devoid of intrinsic meaning. In The Stranger, Meursault gradually came to this realization throughout the novel, beginning with the death of his mother, and in smaller moments, such as when the sick dog of his neighbor Salamano died. The meaninglessness of the world weighed on him at various points, leading him to reject anything that might give life meaning. He came to view courtrooms, love, and even emotions as illusions. Instead, he turned his attention to the physical sensations of the world, the sun, the heat, the act of walking. At one point, when he visited the countryside, the cool breeze and peace away from the city briefly soothed him. He even thought that if there had been no funeral, he might have simply gone for a walk instead. This perspective persisted during his trial. When asked about the reason for the murder he committed, Meursault explained that it was the unbearable sun and heat that had frustrated him. Similarly, when his girlfriend Marie asked whether he loved her, he replied indifferently that it didn't matter to him. He could love her or not, depending on her wish. His detachment seemed strange, but it stemmed from his growing awareness of the world's meaninglessness. While he might have appeared nihilistic in his understanding of the universe, Meursault was not a nihilist, a distinction I will address in the next section of the video. Meursault, however, did not fully grasp the depth of this realization until his confrontation with the chaplain in the novel's final chapter. In that moment, Meursault came to understand that, just as he was indifferent to much of the universe, so too was the universe indifferent to him. Like everyone else, he had been born, would die, and would leave no lasting significance behind. Paradoxically, it was only after arriving at this seemingly bleak understanding that Meursault attained a sense of happiness. Upon accepting the inevitability of death, Meursault realized that it made no difference whether he died by execution or lived to die of natural causes in old age. This realization freed him from clinging to illusions of avoiding his fate through a successful appeal. He recognized these false hopes as mere distractions, creating the illusion that death could somehow be avoided. Liberated from such illusions, Meursault abandoned false hope and embraced the days he had left. Even the chaplain, in his own way, seemed to grasp this truth. With steady eyes and an unwavering voice, he asked Meursault, "Have you no hope at all? Do you really live with the thought that when you die, and nothing remains?" This was the meaning Meursault finally understood. The world held no inherent meaning. Nihilism, one might argue. But as I've mentioned earlier, Meursault was not a nihilist. He was an absurdist. There is a subtle but critical distinction between nihilism and absurdism, a thin line. Camus sought to convey this difference, demonstrating that it is possible to live a happy life even within an indifferent and seemingly meaningless world. Meursault embodied this philosophy. By accepting the absurdity of existence, He found a way to embrace life and, paradoxically, achieve happiness, despite living what might appear to be a traumatic life. This idea, and how Meursault's journey exemplifies it, is what I will now discuss further. Comfort in chaos, absurdism. Meursault's philosophy of life can be summed up in a few simple words. Who cares? Doesn't matter. So what? This mindset was the key to his happiness. When his mother died, instead of grieving, he occupied himself with other activities. While his behavior may have seemed excessively blunt or even inappropriate, it was in fact the key to his peace of mind. He understood that her death was inevitable and irreversible. Crying over it wouldn't change anything. The same calm acceptance marked his time in prison. Meursault was so at ease in jail that even the jailer had to remind him he'd been there for 6 months. The jailer asked him, "Why don't you feel like you're in prison? They've taken your freedom." Meursault, at that moment, reflected on this realization, but then remembered his mother's teaching about how humans can survive and adapt in any condition. Meursault was applying the logic of "so what" in his life. His entire existence embodied absurdism, a view that may seem exaggerated at times, but ultimately, Meursault, though a fictional character, paved the way to a life free from tension. There's a lesson here for all of us, too. In our lives, we often mimic the story of Sisyphus, an existence that may seem hopeless or depressing. Think about the daily 9-to-5 work, where each day blurs into the next, much like Sisyphus pushing his boulder uphill again and again. But absurdism teaches us something else too. Life is about living boldly, exploring and taking chances. Lost your job? It's not the end of the world. Another door will open. Adopt the mindset of "why not?" Start that project you've been putting off, even if it's not perfect. Stop chasing status symbols to impress others. Instead, embrace a philosophy of action. Step out, take risks, and try new things. What's the worst that could happen? Even existential thinkers like Camus remind us that failure is inevitable, but we're meant to rise, try again, and keep pushing forward. Rather than despair, absurdism encourages us to live with passion and live with intention. If you have health, freedom, and the gift of life itself, what more do you need? Meursault lived a happier life than almost every one of us, despite his circumstances. He had a life that, honestly speaking, was a nightmare. His mother died, he killed someone, the police were all over him, and he spent a year in jail only to be sentenced to death. But still, he was happier. Nothing could disturb his peace. Well, of course, the sun did disturb him. Here, there's an important lesson that Camus was trying to convey about how people try to disturb the peaceful in every way possible. Sartre said something similar in his play No Exit, which I'll discuss now. Hell is other people, and those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music. Sartre introduced the concept of the gaze of others, which is a fitting term for what the protagonist faced throughout the novel. It began with the church people when they heard about his sleeping in the basement where his mother's coffin was kept. And of course, when he didn't cry, people judged him then. The true hell for him came in the courtroom where he was judged for his actions. When he confessed to the murder, the magistrate asked him why he had to place his elderly mother in an old age home. He was treated as an outsider, and at one point the judge didn't even call him by his name, but referred to him as Antichrist. The director of the old age home was furious with him and made a scene in court, claiming that his mother was all alone and missed her son. But Meursault didn't care at all. He understood in that moment that nearly everyone in the courtroom hated him. A public protester even shouted, "This man is a monster." This was the hell Camus' protagonist had to endure. But one thing that really bothered Meursault was that his punishment wasn't based on his murder. It was based on the gaze of the people, and most importantly, because he hadn't cried at his mother's funeral. The punishment that should have been legally given to him, according to Meursault's attorney, was one for self-defense, but the judge sentenced him based on his honesty. His life didn't conform to the expectations of others, and that was what bothered everyone so much. Personally, I don't agree with Meursault at every point, but his punishment wasn't a legal one. It was out of hatred. This hate grew because of one major mistake that Meursault made, one that we all make at some point in our lives: miscommunication. Miscommunication. Camus highlighted the theme of miscommunication by showing how characters distorted Meursault's actions and words to fit their own perspectives. In part 1, Raymond mistakenly believed that Meursault supported his plan for revenge and desired a friendship. In part 2, the legal authorities completely misinterpreted Meursault, reading his behavior through a conventional lens. They argued that his lack of grief at his mother's funeral was evidence of a motive for murder. Camus also explored how both external and internal barriers obstruct communication. In the prison visiting room, the noise of other voices made it nearly impossible for Meursault and Marie to have a meaningful conversation. Meursault himself struggled to articulate his thoughts, unable to explain why he shot the Arab because he lacked the capacity for deep introspection. Meursault's straightforward nature further fueled misunderstandings. Through dramatic irony, Camus showed how his refusal to lie isolated him. He didn't claim to love Marie when she asked, didn't express regret for killing the Arab, and didn't perform the expected grief at his mother's funeral. Except for Marie, everyone else saw his honesty as cold and cruel, labeling him as immoral and indifferent. This serves as a great lesson for us about how much trouble we can avoid if we simply communicate better with others, and with our own consciousness too. I remembered a line by Carl Jung here: knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. Anyway, the novel ended with Meursault remembering his mama.